This is the story of how an orphan from Michigan created a system that turned him into an industrial tycoon, a system that not only made him rich, but would revolutionize an entire industry and change the world forever. And more importantly, how you can apply his system and philosophy to your business today. Because once you understand how Ford moved the work to the men, you'll be able to stop the manual grind and start running a professional engine that keeps your cash register ringing. This is his story. Henry Ford was born on a farm in Greenfield Township, Michigan in 1863. His father, William Ford, was a farmer, and his mother, Mary Litigott Ford, was a housewife. As a young man, Henry worked on the family farm and attended school in a one-room schoolhouse. He was an average student, and he hated farm work. He despised it, always daydreaming about how he could make the processes more efficient and less complicated, instead of spending his life repeating the same task every day with no progress whatsoever, while crushing his spirit down to nothing. An unfortunate childhood. When he was only 12 years old, his mother died during the birth of his younger brother. This tragic event left young Henry orphaned. It is said that, after receiving the news and seeing his mother die, Henry fled the house. As he stepped onto the road, a massive steam engine roared past, the first motorized machine he had ever seen. Young Henry's eyes locked onto the metal beast, unable to believe what he was witnessing. In that single, fleeting second, a lifelong obsession with machinery was born. Many psychologists have questioned the possible impact that this event had on young Henry's mind, since it may have served as an emotional relief after his tragic news. According to those who knew him throughout his life, this tragic event motivated him to become one of the most important inventors in history and one of the richest men on Earth. When he was 16, Henry left the farm to work as a machinist in Detroit. He worked in several factories, first at James F. Flour & Brothers, and later at Detroit Dry Dock Company. In 1882, he returned to Dearborn to work on the farm, much to his father's delight. Henry still disliked farm work, but his father had purchased a portable steam engine, which had quickly become a standard among farmers. Henry spent most of his time with this machine and became so good with it that a neighbor at his father's farm paid him $3 to operate his steam engine for him. And from there, Ford's talent and gift for machines spread across Michigan. Word of mouth spread so wide that the Westinghouse Company ended up hiring him to service their steam engines. The gas engine, a wife, and a kid. By 1885, Henry met the love of his life, a beautiful lady by the name of Clara Jane Bryant. They soon got married, and as a wedding present, Henry's father gave him 40 acres with the hope Henry would accept his destiny and return to his farmer heritage. But the more mature in experience, Henry still couldn't see himself as a farmer. Around this time, Henry heard of a revolutionary technology being developed on the old continent, the gas engine, a faster, more efficient machine than the steam engine Henry was used to working with. The gas engine would soon become Henry Ford's obsession and the starting point for his entrepreneurial career. The couple decided to move to Detroit so Henry could be closer to the Industrial Revolution. He got a job working for Edison's illuminating company, which at the time provided electricity to almost all houses in the city. This was an easy job for Henry due to his experience working with steam engines. The job was a blessing, as it allowed him to cover his household expenses and gave him enough free time to experiment with the gas engine. A seed was planted in his mind, and soon it grew bigger and bigger. The dream, the idea, the vision of a better life for the average American. The thought of a personal vehicle to transport people and goods. Countless nights he spent talking about it to his wife. He said to her,
"Not a luxurious machine for the wealthy few, but rather one for the working people, the farmers, and the middle class."
It wouldn't be long before the first car prototype emerged in 1896, kicking off a revolution that would change the world forever. The car, which he called the quadricycle, was a small, four-wheeled vehicle powered by a two-cylinder gasoline engine. While the experiment was successful, it had a major issue: no cooling system. This meant the car was prone to overheating after running for a while. Henry fixed this issue and later sold the vehicle for $200. With the money and support from the Detroit mayor, Henry began to work on his second car, an improved version of the quadricycle. The word spread around Detroit, and soon, merchants of all kinds wanted to join forces with Ford, giving birth on August 5, 1899, to the Detroit Automobile Company. Despite enthusiasm among investors, the company was a total failure. It lacked chemistry, the board wanted quick money, and Ford wanted a racing car. People showed no interest in their cars, and manufacturing them took forever. There were only 20 cars made in 2 years. Henry was fired, and the company closed its doors. But this did not stop Ford's dreams. On the other hand, with less pressure on his shoulders, he and another guy called Childe Harold designed, built, and successfully raced a 26-horsepower automobile in October 1901. The success of the vehicle attracted new investors, and soon the Henry Ford Company was funded. As promising as the company's future looked, it did not last a second. The differences between Henry's vision and stakeholders were clear. Mr. Ford was as obsessed with racing as everyone else in America was at the moment. Ford was no silly man. He knew the presence of the Ford brand in this space was a great form of marketing. But the stakeholders, like any soulless organization, wanted just a mediocre car to sell to make money out of it. So they hired a consultant, also named Henry Martin Leland. Soon, the Battle of Henrys began. Egos were hurt, and nasty things were said. Henry No. 2 was a yuppie, hungry for power, and an investor pleaser. Henry Ford was driven crazy by this. How could investors try to replace him? After all, the company had his name on it. Bother. Angry and sad by bureaucracy, Ford left the company. Henry No. 2 took over, and with Ford out of his way, he renamed the company the Cadillac Automobile Company. Winning races and the assembly line. Once again, Henry Ford was in the streets, a man with an idea but no company. This time, however, things would be different. To start, Ford made a promise to himself to never put himself under orders again. Bureaucracy kills the entrepreneurial spirit, and he knew, deep inside his guts, that racing cars was the key to making his vision a reality. In 1902, Ford and a cyclist by the name of Tom Cooper produced the 80-plus horsepower racer 999. The name was inspired by the fastest locomotive of the time. The 999 racer was taken to the streets of Detroit by amateur car racer Barney Oldfield, who drove it to victory, establishing a new world record. This marketing gimmick was the catalyst for Henry Ford's career. He indeed understood the power of marketing. He even once said,
"If I had $4, I'd use $3 for marketing."
Well, he was right. The amount of recognition he got from the 999 race car brought him tremendous popularity, and now investors were lining up to work with him. Old acquaintance Alexander Y. Malcolmson, who was a coal dealer in Detroit, firmly believed in Henry's vision, which was to make a car for the people.
"I will build a motor car for the great multitude, constructed of the best materials by the best men to be hired after the simplest designs that modern engineering can devise, at a price that no man making a good salary will be unable to own one."
The partnership had a turbulent beginning. Sales were slow, and the company owed a lot of money to suppliers. Alexander turns out to be a great partner and savvy negotiator. He soon gathers 12 investors and convinces the suppliers to join ventures with them so they can centralize the manufacturing process under one roof. And so, the Ford Motor Company was born. The first model was the Ford Model A. It was a tremendous success. Around 1,800 cars were made between 1903 and 1905. After years of struggle, Henry had finally achieved economic success. This was no random luck. The culture imparted inside the Ford organization was like no other, and he hired many impressive young men who shared and believed in his vision. A tight, high-performance team in both body and spirit. Among them were the Dodge brothers, who played a key role in the early success of the Ford Motor Company. They manufactured all the pieces for the cars and eventually started the Dodge brand. During 1903 and 1908, different variations of the original Model A were created, including models B, C, F, K, N, R, AC, and S. Despite selling well, most of the cars did not have any real innovation, and they were all very similar. They were mostly high-end products for the wealthy, which led to disagreements between the board members and Henry Ford, who insisted on producing a car for everyone. However, as the years went by, it became clear that this was easier said than done. The cost of materials and labor continued to rise, and it seemed that there was no way to keep prices down. Machine and man come together. During a trip to Chicago, Henry witnessed the assembly line concept in action at a slaughterhouse. He was amazed at how efficient the process was and how it helped to increase production. At the time, producing cars took forever. Cars were assembled one by one, piece by piece. Henry thought that if they could implement this concept in their factory, it would be a groundbreaking point for the Ford Motor Company and the automotive industry as a whole. With the idea of the assembly line in his mind, Henry's vision of a car for the people would finally come to reality. With this automated process, more cars could be made in less time at a lower price. The materialization of the assembly line wasn't an easy job. Years of brain and muscle mixed with some sweat, blood, and tears were invested before any real progress was made. 1908 began with the introduction of the Ford Model T, affectionately known as the Tin Lizzie. The car was an instant hit with the public. It was affordable, reliable, and easy to drive. More than 15,000 orders were placed, and soon, the Ford Motor Company became the #1 car company in America. But with success also came problems. The company was unable to keep up with the demand for Model Ts. To increase production, Henry realized he needed a bigger factory, and so in 1910, he built a new plant in Highland Park, Michigan. On October 7, 1913, the first Ford Model T rolled off the assembly line. It was a momentous achievement, not just for the company, but for the world. This innovation reduced the time it took to produce a car from 12 hours to 2 hours and 30 minutes. Now, the Ford Motor Company had an out-of-this-world competitive advantage, and they were literally crushing the competition. They were producing more than 300,000 cars a year, which was more than all its competitors combined. The Model T was so popular that by 1918, half of all cars in the world were Ford Model Ts. Around 20 million of them were made from 1908 to 1927. The poor orphan had turned into an industrial tycoon. The king of the automobile. His influence was beyond American frontiers. People knew his cars all over the world, from Russia to France. He was changing the way people lived. A new form of transportation meant new opportunities. It allowed people to move to places they'd never been before, to explore and discover. The automobile created a new sense of freedom, possibility, and independence. And as his influence grew, so did his bank account. He diversified his portfolio, investing in other industries like steel and coal and anything necessary for producing machines. He bought all the shares of his partners and became the sole proprietor of the Ford Motor Company. He now had full control and could do whatever he wanted. But instead of using his power to amass more wealth, he decided to use it to improve the lives of his workers. In 1914, he shocked the business world by doubling their salaries. He also introduced the 8-hour workday and the 5-day work week. He wanted his workers to have time for their families and personal lives outside of work. He was ahead of his time, and these were unheard of benefits at the time. Under his leadership, the Ford Motor Company continued to thrive, and by the 1920s, it was the largest company in the world. Eventually, Henry made Edsel Ford, his 26-year-old son, president of the company. But Henry was really the boss. Competitors were lying in their dead beds, in a hole so deep that only negative thoughts and negative feelings live: desperation, anxiety, frustration, and suicide. But his success would not last forever. Times were changing, and Ford was getting old. His son Edsel and other executives tried to persuade him and warn him about the increasing popularity of brands like Chevrolet, which developed expensive but more stylish and comfortable cars, suggesting it was time for a new model by the end of the 1920s. But Henry was reluctant to change. He thought the Model T was perfect and didn't need any improvements. He was wrong. As the years went on, other companies began to catch up with Ford's production levels, and soon the Model T's popularity began to decline. Sales were in the clutter, and numbers don't lie. The old, stubborn king of automobiles couldn't ignore them anymore. To stay ahead of the competition, Ford needed to come up with a new model that would be even better than the Model T. In 1927, production of the Model T came to an end. It was a very emotional moment for Henry. He even shed a tear as the last car came off the assembly line. It was time for a new model. The Model A. The Model A was lighter, faster, and more stylish than the Model T, and it quickly became a success. Approximately 4 million Model A cars were produced from 1927 to 1931. However, by the early 1930s, the Great Depression had begun, and people were no longer buying cars. In fact, car sales had decreased by 50%. Many companies went out of business, but Ford managed to stay afloat. To weather the storm, Ford was forced to lay off workers and reduce salaries. By 1943, his son Edsel died from stomach cancer. And by the end of 1945, Henry Ford turned over the company control to his grandson, Henry II. The company was now in good hands. And under Henry II's leadership, the Ford Motor Company would prosper once again. The king of automobile later died of a cerebral hemorrhage on April 7, 1947. Today, Ford Motor Company owns a market cap of around $70 billion and remains one of the biggest car companies in the world. And here is where the business lesson comes in for you to apply Henry Ford's principles in your business in today's day and age. Look, Henry Ford's true legacy wasn't the car, it was the system. He proved that you don't grow by working harder. You grow by building an assembly line that moves the work to the men so the engine never stops. In 2026, you gotta apply that assembly mentality to every part of your business, especially to the marketing and sales department. Because most business owners today are living in Ford's 1903 manual labor era. They're hand-building every single sale, manually chasing leads in DMs, manually sending emails, and manually trying to remind people they exist. If they stop moving for one day, the factory stops. And that's why you need to build your own sales and marketing assembly line. The way to do that in the digital space is with an email marketing system. An email marketing system moves your brand to your customers every single day, automatically. It's a digital assembly line that handles the nurturing, the trust building, and the follow-ups while you sleep. You build the system once, and then it works for you. Ford understood that if he wanted to materialize the dream of a car for the people, he needed a system and marketing to let people know what he was doing. In today's world, an email marketing system is your sales-generating assembly line. Quick side note, if you're a business owner who knows they need to get their email marketing sorted, the sequences, the automations, the whole system, but you'd rather have someone just build it for you, our team at thekissmarketing.com can help. Details are in the description below. Now that you know that you can have your own assembly line to market and sell your products more efficiently, don't let your leads sit cold for weeks or months. Every day that passes without a touch point, without a reason for them to remember you, is a day your competitor has a chance to take them. Don't let that happen. Build the assembly line. Set up the sequences. Show up in the inbox. Stay top of mind and make money. If you love this story and you want to see more lessons from legendary business figures, click the video that appears on the screen. I'm breaking down the 4 principles John D. Rockefeller used to build a fortune so large that he never had to work a day in his life again.